Good. All right. And so I'm going to just put my picture up here. There we go. All right. So what do we say up to now? We're talking about how money comes into the world. Where does money come from? So a person can say, what do you mean, where does money come from? It comes from work. It comes from work. You work and you get money. That's where it comes from. Or, some people say it comes from the government. The government pays you welfare. Or some people say money is bad. There shouldn't be any money. All we need is just goods, needs should be provided. Everybody gets a house. Everybody has a food. Everybody has a car. The needs of people they're provided. Yeah, we don't need money. Okay, but in the end, you need something to keep you alive. You have to have food. You have to have clothes. You have to have a house. You have different needs. Who provides for all these things? And so the Rebbe is trying to convince us that it's really Hashem. It's really God. And God really provides for everything. Because a person could say, okay, I agree that God creates the world. Okay, that's God's business. Who creates the world? That's his thing. God's thing is creating the world. I can't create anything. And I agree that God enlivens everything. Because that's also God's business. Life, I can't make things alive. So that's up to God. So God creates everything. Good. And God enlivens everything. Okay, good. But money, I make the money. It's not the God. I have to work. If I don't work, there's not going to be any money. So life and existence and the consciousness and all these things come from God. But money, that comes from me. I got to work. It's mine. And so the Rebbe says, oh, this is very good. That's how God made the world. God made the world that we have to work. It's true. And that's in fact why God put man in the world. If it wasn't for that, God would have sufficed with the angels. The angels, they're also creations, and they're serving God all the time, and they're praising God and singing out to God, burning up to God, and they don't go to work because they don't need to. Their food is spiritual. So why not the same thing with us? Here, it was a thing like this. The Jewish people, when God took them out of Egypt, so he gave them food from heaven. They didn't have to work. 40 years they were in the desert, and they got food from heaven, and they got water from a rock, and the food tasted like whatever it wanted to. And if once in a while the person wanted to eat a chicken or something, so they had animals that were with them also. So they didn't have to work for anything. They didn't have to do anything. No. So we see that God doesn't want that now. Here we have to work now, right? We have to work. So God created. Why does God want it? Why did God? In fact, the Jewish people, they didn't want to go into the land of Israel because they didn't want to work. They didn't, because they knew that if they started working, they would forget God. They would forget about God. So, and God got very angry, and Moses got very angry, right? You don't want to go into the land of Israel. That's terrible. But they were right. What was wrong with that? They didn't want the world to get in the way of their belief and their concentration and their love and their fear of God. So that's pretty good. So why did God get mad? So the answer is because that's not what God wants. God doesn't want you to be in the desert, and he doesn't want angels. He created them. It's a how do you say, a temporary go-between, right? As a transitory state. Transitory state. When the Jews were in the desert, it was just a transition from Egypt, where they had to work all the time, and they didn't have a chance to think about anything. So they're going to go into Israel, where they don't have to work all the time. They can learn Torah, they'll do the commandments, but they do have to work some of the time. And that's the whole trick, is to work, be in the world, and realize that it is only God that is providing for everything. In other words, we have to do all the work and God gets all the credit. That's the trick. To be in the desert and God give all the work, of course we're going to give him the credit. But if we're in the world and we do the work, and nevertheless give God the credit, and we have to remember, we agreed that God creates us, and we agree that God gives us life. Now the trick is how can it be that if I work, I get money, and if I don't work, I don't get any money. And now I have to give God all the credit. And why did the word obviously comes from me. If I didn't work, I wouldn't get anything. How can I give God the credit for this? So that's the whole idea. God wants there to be what's called a dira b'tachtonim. He wants to be revealed in this world and in the principles of this world. That God should be revealed even in work, even in money, even in what appears is totally ours. We have to give it and attribute it to the Creator. That's something like that. That's the essence of Judaism. That's what we learned this week when Adam took his son Yitzhak and sacrificed. That was everything that Abraham worked for his whole life. Everything that he worked for his whole life was Yitzhak. That's all he wanted, Yitzhak. And now God said, take him and kill him. Take him and sacrifice him. And Abraham said, no problem, because I know that it all comes from you, and I know that somehow or other, everything's going to be okay. And luckily, God doesn't request that from someone else. But Abraham did it. So here, this is what the Rebbe is trying to say. We must work in the world. We have to work in order to make a living, and we have to realize that really our work is just a means. It's just a pipe, and the source is God. Don't think for 1 second that our work is the source. So let's go. Here we go. Hine levushia teva, the garments of nature. The garments of nature, like working, having a store, buying merchandise, selling it, right? Working for somebody else. Even though that this is what God wants, that there should be nature, God makes a world. May God be blessed, and God be exalted. That it rose up in God's mind, Yisbrech may be blessed. Lebore olam, to create a physical world. Asher kol inyan v'davar, everything in the world, Afghan or Eloki, even also the godly light which is enlivening the world and creating the world, yeh mitalem, it should be concealed, umistater, and hidden belevushia teva, in nature. So what happens in this world? Why do we think that our business is what gives us money, or our hard work gives us the money, and not God? It's very simple, because we don't see God. We don't see God, we don't feel God. And the reason we don't see God and we don't feel God is that's what God wanted. God created this world in such a way that it seems that the world is all there is. That's it. There is no more. Maybe there's spiritual worlds, and after a person dies, he goes to the spiritual worlds. But the main thing is here is what we see here. That's what we're dealing with. Spirits and world to come, and that's after you die. That we have no control about, and there's no reason to get too interested in it. The main thing by us is here, this world, and that's all there is this world. You don't see God, you don't see a creator. In a im calls there, nevertheless, in a levushia teva, the garments of nature, your business, that's it. Food, mitzad etzem uhutam, in their essence, harihim malimi, they conceal, umastirim, and they hide, et or shef eloki, the light and the blessing from God. Ad, to such a degree, a person that he works in business, he can make a mistake, and to imagine to himself, as though the only reason that he has money is because he worked for it. And where is the source of the money? Himself, his work. And that his wisdom, that is what is supporting him. That he all of a sudden has surprised new ideas, genius ideas in his business, a mekach v'memcha in his business, that the business goes according to nature, lachkor v'lidrosh, we're calling it kenios. Now we can go and find where is the cheapest place to buy. Bachar b'darachim hayoter notim, and now we can choose the best way to sell, the best customers, the easiest way to get the produce from one place to another. Nifi darki atava, according to nature. Became the ofanei mechira, buying and also selling. He makes advertising and all sorts of tricks and gives free samples. According to nature. And that's the reason that he succeeds. To make a big profit. Now, of course, you have to buy, and you have to buy, and you have to sell, and you have to try to buy at the cheapest price and the best merchandise, and to sell at the most expensive price, and make sure you have customer service, and all these things are necessary. But don't think for 1 second that God is out of the picture. Don't think for one instant that the blessing that you get from this, all the money that you get from what you do, this is coming from the business. It's not coming from the business. It's all coming from God. Okay, you don't see it, you don't feel it. That's what's called putting God into the world, making a dira b'tachtonim, to have faith in God, even though it doesn't seem logical or reasonable at all. That's the essence of the Jewish people. Be'emed, really, kol elu, levushi teva, all these garments of nature, you're buying, you're selling, your business, your customers, eino ala levush. All these things are only just garments. Levad, of la bracha, the blessing, nimshechas milamayla, comes from above. Al yedei levush, by means of the garment. Lo mitzad atzmos levush, and not from the essence of the garment itself. The garment, it's almost like saying a piano is what makes the music, or a violin makes the music. You have to have a piano, you have to have a violin, there's no doubt about it. But it's the player, it's the performer that really makes the music, right? And if you want to go deeper, so the performer himself, right, if one day he forgets, all of a sudden he just forgets how to play, or his hand gets paralyzed, so that's it, he's finished. So suddenly he realizes that the whole thing is really dependent on God. But here the Rebbe wants to say something a lot deeper. He wants to say that God purposely makes it that we have to work for money. And if we don't work, we won't get money. But you have to know that your work is only just a pipe. It's just a door. And the real blessing comes through it from God. You have to open the door. You have to have a pipe. But don't think for 1 second that it's the pipe. They say the story that this was in in the days of communism, so that someone came from communist Russia, came to America, and maybe the president of the United States, whatever, and the president of the United States took the premier of Russia, and he took him around, and he took him to a big, huge factory, and he showed everybody's working, they're all working hard, and then suddenly at 12 o'clock, the whistle blows, everyone goes on lunch break. Everyone goes on lunch break. It's a half an hour lunch break. And after the half an hour, it blows again. And everyone comes back. And the premier of Russia said, what I want, after we finished the whole thing, he said, listen, I want to do me a favor. Give me that whistle. I want that whistle. If that whistle is that's what makes people stop working and start working, that's what I want. So, and he took the whistle back to Russia. They just put it back in the middle of a city, and he blew the whistle, and nothing happened. Nothing happened, right? Because the whistle wasn't doing anything. It was the workers that were doing it. The whistle was just a sign. The same thing is over here. Your business is just a sign. If the whistle doesn't blow, then people won't come back to work. But it was just a sign to tell them when to start. The same thing. Your business is just like a sign. It's a starting gun to show when should God give you the blessing. So the garment is only just like a messenger, lavad. But the money that comes through it, it's only in the hands of God. But it has to have a garment of a business, which is nature. They say, I'm not sure if this is true, but they say that it's really true. I've heard it from a lot of people, that when the Ethiopians came here, the first Ethiopians came as they were very backward, and they hadn't seen a television. So they put them in whatever it is in these absorption centers, and they put a television there for their enjoyment, whatever it is, and they just went wild. They couldn't figure out how do all these little people get inside of this box. It doesn't make any sense. How could it possibly be? And where do they go when you turn it off? They're looking inside of the box. Somebody got an idea maybe to open up the back. Maybe they shouldn't do it because they'll get out or they'll run around. So it's the same thing over here. Television is not the source of the programs on the television. There's programs. There's the main station, wherever it was, and that station sends out the programs. You just have to have a television in order to receive, to actually, the same thing in your business. God is sending you a blessing, but you have to have the proper receiver in order to get it. But don't think for 1 second that your business is what gives you money, just like the same thing as the foolishness of thinking that people are inside of the television. It's not so. Just that God wants that his blessing should come through the business, which that's the garment, a natural garment. So God wants us to use nature as a vehicle to reveal godliness. And what is godliness? The money that we make from the business. That we realize that this is a blessing from God. What difference does it make if we say it's a blessing from God or not? Because then if God gives us a lot, it won't go to our head. We don't think, well, I did it because I'm so slick. Or God forbid, if we lose the money, so we won't think, well, this is terrible. We know that, listen, it's God that wanted me to lose. And therefore, there must be some message in this, some purpose. According to this, movement is understood. Don't put too much emphasis in the garment. Because it's not necessary. Because the garment is not the main thing. The garment doesn't give you the money. It doesn't give you the blessing. But the blessing comes from God. That it comes through the garment. Through the garment. It's like if you say, there's a store that's giving away free suits. So a fellow comes back and he's got a suit that's like 20 measures too big. He has to roll up the pant legs, and they're always coming down. So he puts like pins there so it holds them up. And the jacket is like 20 sizes too big on him. It's just all flapping down. So what did you buy a big garment like that for? What? They didn't have anything left. He said, no, they did. But if they're giving away for free, so why not take the biggest one they've got? I mean, that's ridiculous because it just gets in his way and he can't walk properly and things are hanging over his hands and he looks like a clown. So the same thing with business. You have to realize that you have to take the garment in the proper measure. And the business is only the garment. Too much business you take, it just is going to get in your way. So it says, that's what it comes through the garment. So what are we supposed to do? We have to pray to the one who the riches and the possessions are his, God. And we have to correct and straighten our path in the world, in the way of Torah and the commandments. That it should be fitting, to the blessing of God, and the kindness that he gives. This is how we started the Maimer off, right? We talked about that on Rosh Hashanah, that God decides how much he's going to give us, and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, by means of what we do on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that we accept the yoke of the kingship of heaven, by means of our tshuva, our true tshuva and returning to God. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That's what determines what we're going to get for the next part of the year, for the rest of the year. I'm sorry. And in addition to that, every day we also have to continue making vessels, because it could be that God has decided for us to give us riches, but in the rest of the year we don't do anything to bring these riches home. Right? You win the lottery. They put $20 million in the bank, but you don't go to the bank. You don't want to spend the money for a cab, for a taxi cab. So you don't go to the bank. So all the money is same thing. You can get a big blessing, Rosh Hashanah, but then the whole rest of the year you have to work in order to do something to go and get this blessing. Hainu, Shalom b'shvil zeh shekodesh baruch hu mashpia lo kitzvat chesed sheuktzva lo. Not that we, I'm sorry, on Rosh Hashanah, we accept the yoke of heaven and we say we're going to serve you, God, without any thought of repayment. And that's called Kabbalat Ol. We accept the yoke, we'll do whatever you say, God, and we'll try to do what you want, and you also do what you want. You can do with us whatever you want. You're the boss, we're not the boss. It says, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we accept what's called the yoke of heaven. We say to ourselves, God, you're the king, you're the master, you just tell me what to do, I'll just take orders. Then that's what evokes this big blessing. But we're not surrendering ourselves to God and connecting to God for the sake of that God will give us a lot of kindness and money. So of course I'll accept on myself the yoke of heaven. Why? Because if I do that, then I'm getting in good with the boss, with God, and then God will give me what I want. He said, no, the reason it is I'm doing tshuva, not to receive money. The reason I am accepting on myself the yoke of heaven and doing tshuva will be true, not for what I'm going to receive, but only for what I'm going to give. The reason that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'm accepting on myself the yoke of heaven and swearing to God, I'll do whatever you want. Please, I just want to be your servant. It's not in order to make a good impression on God, but I'm doing because this is what has to be. If God's creating me, I owe him everything. And all God wants from me is just loyalty, partnership. That's all he wants. And so therefore I'm asking God, help me that I can do what you want. And what do you want? Fulfilling what the Torah says, fulfilling, and the commandments. Kol Hashanah, the whole rest of the year, litpalel, to pray, tefillah b'zmana, at the proper time, ubekavana, proper intention. That's what I'm asking for on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. God, please give me the motivation, the inspiration, that I should serve you totally for the whole rest of the year. I should learn Torah, I should do the commandments, I should pray with intention. And in prayer, I should ask for what I need, and I should learn Torah in the proper times, in the times that are set, without any interruptions, without any prevention. Then after I do that, and I devote myself to you, God, afterwards, Yasik v'masam v'madan, then I will go and work in business. V'yasmik gam me'at zman alasik, then I won't have to spend so much time in my business. Because he got this kindness, tachlis the Eser Sfirot, Akelim, I said these are the Kelim, Eser Sfiros, because now God's blessing will be put into these garments, which God's garments, we said, are the 10 Sfirot, the 10 aspects of God's personality of Bria, Yetzir and Asiyah, the Einu Chaser. Now, if so, the blessing is already there. The blessing is in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the blessing comes down through all the other worlds. Now, all this last is just the final level, a lavush hateva, the garment, a physical garment, shel amazolos, of the zodiac, the stars, and also a little bit lower than that, my business, kli parnasa, that I have to buy myself a hammer or whatever it is to go to university to learn to be a doctor, to be a lawyer. Asher al-kain, therefore, with only a little bit of work that I do, and then this kindness, this love of God, and this blessing of God, through just a little bit of work that I do, will be drawn down into this physical world. This is a very basic thing in just in life in general. You see a person, that's really a big expert at something. A person that's a big expert at something. Let's say you go to a doctor. A doctor who's a big expert, so he looks at a person and he says, "I know what's wrong with you. I know what's wrong, and I know how to fix it." Right? Takes 2 minutes, knows the whole thing. That'll be $100,000. $100,000. Wow, it's a lot of money. He says, "Yeah, go to another doctor and see what he says." So you go to another doctor, you pay $1,000. Oh, you have to have an operation. It'll be really difficult. I think we can do it. They'll see, right? The operation will cost you $100,000. Oh, everything together. We'll throw in the visit also. Says, well, this is $100,000 for 2 minutes, and this $100,000 is going to make an operation. It's going to take, just to make the operation. It's going to take a couple of hours, and then for me to get better. The problem is the expert doctor. He really knows what he's talking about, and the other doctor might work also. Could work. So which would you rather spend? Right, $10,000 on the expert that he only takes 2 minutes, or $10,000 on the regular doctor that'll take 2 months, right, to cure. And who knows if it's going to work? Says the Rebbe, it's the same thing over here. If you prepare yourself, and if you prepare your connection to the Creator, like this expert doctor, he connected to the source of healing. He's a big genius, and he knows what health is, he knows what sickness is. So therefore, the same thing with us. When we connect ourselves to the source of all money, the source of all income, then we know that the reason God put us down here is not to make money. It's a very, very secondary thing, or tertiary. The main thing God put us here is to serve Him, to do good deeds, to learn Torah, to do the commandments, to pray properly, to be a good example. And part of it, we have to bring this into doing business. But if we really make the preparation, we become like this expert doctor, then it won't take so long in the business to make the money. A little bit of work, we can get exactly what we need. And that's also one thing the Rebbe does not talk about in this is sometimes a person can be rich, he can make $1 million, and the $1 million is a big curse to him. But we've talked about this before. I mean, you can take just a simple example, these people who win the lottery. They say that 90-something%, it always ends in tragedy. It ends in tragedy because the person gets easy money and he's not prepared for it, doesn't know what to do with the money. So sometimes a person can make $1 million. I mean, a person that makes $100 billion, right? $100 billion. He's not 100 times smarter than a person who makes $1 billion. And he's certainly not, right? He's $100 million, I'm sorry. 100 billion. He's not 100 times smarter than a person who makes 1 billion. And he's certainly not 100,000 times smarter than a person that makes $1 billion. Right? A person that makes $1 million, makes 1 million. So 1 million is 1,000th of $1 billion. A person that has $1 billion is 1,000 times smarter than a person that has 1 million. Well, no such thing. And a person that has 100 billion is 100,000 times smarter than a person who only has 1 million. Of course not. Of course not. So we see that the blessing is a thing that's determined by God. It's a matter, you want to call it luck, call it whatever you want. But the Rebbe says it's not luck, not at all. Luck is, it has nothing to do with creating us, and luck is not kind. Luck is just a thing of nature. Somebody has to win, so he wins. But here we're talking about God's blessing. God's blessing is, number one, it can be infinite. But number two is that it depends on what we do. It depends on what we do. So therefore, when a person is fit, deserves, according to his deeds in Torah and the commandments, for God's kindness, and then there's drawn to him kindness from the level of Atika Kadisha. This is what we call the inside essence of God. Remember, we talked about that when we're talking about the Ne'ilah prayer, by means of the arousing of all the spirit of Atzilut, like we said before, Kaf Daled, the previous paragraph. And from Malchut of Atzilut, from the lowest level of this world of Atzilut, it comes down. Atzilut is the highest of the 4 dimensions, right? So the lowest aspect of Atzilut it comes down and is drawn into the vessels of the 10 sfirot of Bria and Yetzira and Asiya. And it becomes more and more physical until finally it comes into the stars and the constellations. And then finally it comes down by means of our work that we do in our business. So in other words, what's the Rebbe saying? Our business is so far away from the source, tremendously far away. So we can see what a foolishness is to think that our business that we make, you open up a store, you're a doctor, you make investments in the stock market or whatever, in the stock market or whatever, you're a businessman and you make a lot of money. Don't think in any way that it's your intelligence and your deals that are making you the money. Because before it comes to you, this blessing was in the stars, in the zodiac. Before it came to the stars, it was in the angels. And then there was the angels of Yetzirah. Then there's Bria. Then there's the world of Atzilus. Then there's even higher, right? And it was all determined, first of all, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we have to understand that that which we make a business, we make money, that's just the end of a very long process. To think that that's the beginning, that the source of our money comes from the business, comes from this, it's an incredible foolishness. Oh, well, but if God forbid, in a roy, if a person is not fitting, he doesn't deserve this kindness, namely that there was no blessing in the world of Atzilut. B'Rosh Hashanah, B'Yom Kippurim, Kalal, we're not talking about someone who does not have a blessing at all on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It could be the person does draw blessing down for money on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but afilu gamim nimshach, even if there is this blessing waiting for him in the upper spiritual worlds of Malchut of Atzilut, of the lowest aspect of the highest world, just waiting at the mouth of Atzilut to come down. You have to draw it down and form it, put it into garments of Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya in a way that it can come down into the physical world. Like we explained before in Tetvav, remember we explained before that the blessings, they have to be, articulated so that they come down into the world. As they are in the spiritual worlds, it's very, very, amorphous. There's no form to it. So in order for it to come down, these blessings to come down in a way that we can relate to him, so we have to make vessels. If so, it could be that the blessing is waiting for us in Atzilut, but we don't do anything to deserve it. So so what's it good to work in your business, since if the kindness is not waiting for him in the upper worlds? If so, you should devote yourself therefore to godliness. When you draw down this kindness of God, then we'll realize that as the blessing of God can make a person rich, even with a little bit of business. Okay, so there's one big point over here. The Rebbe is not telling you that if you're poor, don't worry about it. You're poor, you get along with a little bit. All you need is a little bit of bread and maybe something to smear on it, maybe, and a little water, and that's it. You don't need anything more than that. The Rebbe is not saying that in this mimer. The Rebbe is saying that it's a good thing that everyone should be rich. It's a good thing. And in a way, it's a thing that's going to be. The Rambam writes that in the future of Mashiach, that there's going to be all the pleasurable things in the world, and all of the most expensive food and clothes, whatever, they'll be like dirt. It'll just be so plentiful, nobody will really pay that much attention to it. You put on whatever nice clothes you have, you'll eat a good meal. But how many meals can you eat? Tasty meals, How many? They say the Romans used to go into the place to stick their finger in their throat and throw up so they could eat more. Okay, maybe they used to do that, but still, even then, there's a limitation. There's a limit. So the blessing of God That's what makes a person rich. And the Rebbe is saying that it's a good thing that everybody should be rich. You should have the finest clothes, you should have the finest food, you should have the finest, if that's what you want. Some people couldn't care less about it. They wouldn't, if you gave them a choice between, I remember the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he had a Cadillac. He had a Cadillac that they used to go, when you had to go somewhere, he had a Cadillac to go there. Mostly he would only go to the cemetery, to the grave of his father-in-law. But when you go in that Cadillac, it was a nice big Cadillac, but it was like, I don't know, from the year, 1960 or something, 1970. I mean, people might know. It's one of those nice big ones they used to have in the 60s and the 70s. This big. Well, somebody said, it's not nice. He bought the Rebbe a brand new Cadillac, best Cadillac you can buy. He bought it for him. The Rebbe came out one day and he saw this Cadillac. He says, where's my car? So they said, somebody donated this to you. So the Rebbe said, what's wrong with the old car? The old car, it ran fine. It was a nice car. What do you have to have a new car for? So they understood, and the fellow took the car back. Maybe give money to some charity or something. But the point of the matter is some people, they don't need big riches. But on the other hand, it's not a bad thing to have riches. To be fantastically rich, that every Jew should have $10 billion in the bank to give charity in it. That, by the way, according to Judaism, there must be rich people and poor people. Capitalism is the ideal form of economics. That everybody works, and you work, and everybody gets from their job, like he says, the job, through the job comes God's blessing. And if you get blessed a lot, so you look around for the people who are not blessed, and you give them charity. And that's really riches. That's the true riches. Giving other people charity, that's true riches. Because the money doesn't really belong to us. That's what the point of this mimer is. The money does not really belong to us. The money is a blessing from God. It's not because of our hard work that we get the money. We have to work hard in order just to make a vessel. Right? It's to make a vessel. But it's like a person, praising himself that he bought the lottery ticket and he got $20 million because he knows how to buy those tickets, and he knows, what it is. No, he got lucky. Kitzur. In fact, I know somebody that he won the lottery in Israel. It was like 3 million shekels, which 3 million shekels is like, let's say for our purposes, $1 million. Back then, I don't know. And he really thought that it was because of him. He thought that he himself was like, Mr. Lucky, and a successful person. He was just born, under a good sign or whatever it is. And he started, in no time, he lost all the money, and he got himself into big troubles in other places also, because he really thought that he could trust every urge that he had. And by the time he realized that he was wrong, it was just too late already. He got divorced, a terrible. So that's what he says. The Rebbe is saying, we have to understand that the blessing comes from God. The garments of nature, even though that they are according to what's above, but nevertheless they conceal very much. And really, they're only just garments. You shouldn't deal too much with the garments, but rather with the godliness that comes through them. So what does that mean? That we have to be careful in our prayers, and we have to pray with the tzibur, and we should pray slowly. We should have certain times for Torah that we never miss. And when, God forbid, a person does not act properly, then it won't help all the business that he does. When he is proper, then even a little bit of business, a little bit of work in business will be sufficient. Let's begin the next one. Oh, we still have like 10 minutes, huh?
Yes, we can begin the next one.
But okay, here, let me see. I just have to turn the page over here. How do I do? Oh, I like this. I like this here. Hine. Chapter 3. There are many businessmen and working men that they fear God, and it's very dear to them, prayer. And also they set times for learning Torah. And they have different classes that they go to. In Gemara, Mishnah, and Yaakov, Halacha, and also in Chassidus, Chassidut, Divrei Elokim Chaim, it's called the words of the living God, Chassidut. And their heart hurts them when they're not able to pray with their congregation and they're not able to join a class or learn with the set times that they made of Torah, especially if it's Torah with a lot of people. There are some people that they make a big effort to pray all the time. Okay, that's number one. That's the ideal. Then there are some businessmen that they make a big effort to pray and in the congregation, but they snatch their prayers and they hurry up because after all, they have to get to the business. And to go to a class of Torah, to learn Torah, this is not really one of their priorities at all. Because not only that they're working very hard in their business and they haven't got any free time to learn, not only that, but their whole mind is on the business. And it's filled with all sorts of ideas about selling and buying and making profits and expanding the business and, how the this year's profits are going to come in. Physical things. And they're not able, even when they sit in a Torah class, they're not really able to receive ideas of Torah. And also their prayers is mahul, it's like all confused in their minds, and it's mixed in with all sorts of strange thoughts. I should come upon them until sometimes they don't even know what they're praying or which psalm they're saying in prayer. But what? Mishigra, they just say the words. The Lishna, Shigra the Lishna, they just say the words. But their heart is not there at all. But there's something good about this. They have what's called the acceptance of the yoke. Prayer is important to them. And so they do pray in a congregation. But there's some people that are so busy in their business that they can only pray in a congregation like on Monday and Thursday. That's when the Torah is read. That's when the other times they pray in their house, they pray in their room. And all of them have excuses. All of them have excuses. What's the excuses? The reason is because they got to make money. They're not able to pray with a congregation, and especially to go to some sort of a class of learning Torah, because kol sichlim, their whole mind is only in their business, and they're not able to accept words of Torah in their mind. Right? They don't know what the rabbi who's giving the class. They don't know what he's talking about, and he asks a question. They don't know what the question is, and then he gives an answer. And they didn't even know what the question was. So, of course, the answer means absolutely nothing to them. Okay, this would be okay if you could understand it if the Torah was like an optional thing. Right? There's also, you can be religious, and then there's, making a living and then being religious. It's like two things. And you're supposed to emphasize the being religious. But the fact of the matter is it's not two things. It's only one thing. There's only one God. And God creates you, and he creates your business too. And he's the source of all the money. So how can it be that you put more emphasis in your business more than you put on God? I mean, the business is just being created by God. But it doesn't seem that way, doesn't look that way. And it also doesn't look like God is the one giving you the blessing. You have to buy, you have to sell, you have to be there. So it's pretty obvious that I'm the source of the blessing. Bad conduct like this Not only that, that all the days of the week, a person lives sort of like an animal, and sometimes even worse than an animal. Kamosha mitoneh, a Navi like Isaiah, Yeshaya, the prophet, he complains, Yodea shor koneo, even an ox knows who his master is, and a donkey knows where the feeding trough of his bosses are, his owner. And the Jewish people, they don't know. Lonit bonin, they're not thinking. Okay, an animal doesn't have to think, it's natural. But the Jewish people do have to think. An animal can't think, so he hasn't got that ability. Human beings can think, and that's what we should do. Not only that, and this strange conduct, and this strange and how do you say evil, bad conduct on the weekdays, this causes such a bad situation that even on Shabbat, when his business is closed and he's not doing any work store, now he's free, right? Nevertheless, on Shabbos there he takes the time, he reads the newspaper, he talks to his friends. Besides the fact that he works so hard in the weekdays, that the person is very, tired. He's tired on Shabbos. He wants to rest. He put all of his energy in the Shabbos. So you have to rest from all the sleep that you didn't get. He was so worried about his business that he only got 4 hours of sleep every night. And now it comes to Shabbos and he can sleep for 20 hours. Except for that, because he is so mundane in the rest of the weekdays, he becomes thick and insensitive so much that even when it comes to Shabbos, Holy Shabbos, which is the day of rest. What do you mean rest from physical things? It's a time when we can add on to prayer and learning Torah. The people, the businessmen, are so busy. And the things we said before is mechalim is kedusha Shabbos. They completely defile the holiness of Shabbat and hevel v'divurim b'telin and wasted time. And I've seen that, right? People on Shabbat, they meet in shul. The rest of the week they're working hard. Then they meet in shul. What do they talk about? Business. That's what they're thinking about all the time anyway. Business. Did you know that if you buy in this city that the taxes are less, and that if you invest over here, did you know that I know somebody who bought a hubcap over there and he sold it? And that's what they talk about. That's what they talk about. Okay, what are you going to do? Says this is a very common thing, a very easy trap for people to fall into. And the Rebbe is talking about his own Hasidim. He's not talking about everybody else. So a person comes to the point where he imagines that he can't learn Torah. He can't learn Torah, not even when he's free to do it. He imagines that it's not for him. Or prayer the boy, because maybe he's going to miss something. Maybe he'll miss some sort of news or some sort of Hu Dimion Kozev. This is all false dreams. V'shtut Gedola, and a total insanity. That in any case, if Chas v'Shalom lo yesh k'tzva, if God does not decide what you're going to get from above, Rahman Islam, if God decides you're not going to get anything, so ma yoyelo kol riba yasaskos, then what's it going to, all your tricks that you're doing, how's that going to help? And if yesh kitzvas, fam shachas chesed milamayla, and if you have been chosen to get money on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, God decided, is ein tzarechim, then you don't have to work so hard. You can even work a little bit. So if on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur wasn't decided for you, you're going to make money, so you can do whatever you want to, you're not going to get it. And if it's decided that you are going to get the money, so then only a little bit of effort you can get it. Because the work is only just a garment. Now this doesn't mean that you should make as small a garment as possible. You can have a chain of your department stores or whatever you can have. But the point of the matter is how much do you sink yourself into this, right? Is it, but Rebbe Terosov and the tremendous, how do you say, busyness that a person and confusion that it makes in a person's mind, Masha Yeshlo, this stops him and prevents him, from learning Torah. The fact that the business gets in his way from learning Torah, this is Shtutia Yetzer. This is one of the insanities that your Yetzer Hora puts into your mind. And it shows as though Choshev, that he makes important this garment, namely the business, becomes the main thing. Shazem Makar Parnasot, this is the source of his income. Therefore, he's very busy and he's working at it all the time. But the fact of the matter is, says the Rebbe, let's say we can do this. Hari, this, says the Rebbe, is really idolatry. You think you're bowing down to your business. That we explained before. That the person bows down to the heavens, to the sun and the moon, because he thinks that the sun and the moon, they're providing him his blessing. And really the fact of the matter is the sun and the moon, they are just emissaries. They're just garments through which this God's blessing can come. Similarly, the same thing. When a person thinks that his business is the main thing, and because of this, he's always busy and thinking about his business all the time, this is just like in other words, he lowers his head down. This is bowing down. Just like a person that he bows down, what does he do? He bends over his head, right? He lowers his head. Similarly, also, when a person puts his mind that's in his head, and his mind, which is his head, and the majority of his body in business, until this prevents him from either learning Torah or praying. So this is also bowing down spiritually. You're bowing your head down to your business. It's like doing idolatry, mamish, chas v'shalom, God forbid. And here's the summary. Businessmen and people that work, but they don't pray with a congregation, and they don't set times, or they daven very quickly, and they're filled with all sorts of weird thoughts when they pray, and they don't join classes of Torah because they have all sorts of excuses that they're busy in their business. This causes for a person to become thick and insensitive, and that they defile the holiness of the Shabbat with stupidity and foolishness. And the reason for this is because of false imaginations, these crazy thoughts that people have and that they pay attention to. And because of that, it totally makes them, insensitive to anything that deals with Torah or commandments. This is spoken about also in Bati Lagani, where he talks about Shtutal Umayan. It's insane. God gives us the Torah, God gives us the commandments, and God gives us. He's creating us all the time. All he wants is that we should learn the Torah and do the commandments. You can work, you can have a good time, but give something to God. So it says, not doing so is foolishness. Thinking that the business is more important to God because the business gives me my food. And God, okay, he does his godly things. He gives me my life. My food comes from the business. Says the Rebbe, it's not so. Your food and your money comes from Hashem. And the business is just a means. Thinking about this, understanding this, frees your mind to appreciate the words of prayer, to appreciate the words of the Holy Torah, to appreciate doing a commandment, and it makes you happy because you're living with the truth. As we'll talk about more, God willing, next week. Thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it very much. And hope to see you again next Monday.
Thank you very much.
With Mashiach now.
No sztos.
Shalom.